Bruchim Haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Lamed Beis, Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. The Gemara began a discussion about giving stern punishment for various Averos. It spoke about Sinas Chinam, Chala, and Truma. Now our Gemara turns to Gezela. Says the Gemara, Be'ovon Gezel. For the sin of Gezel, Hagovoi Oila. Locusts begin eating crops. V'harov hoive, and hunger is the norm. Uvnei adam oichlin basar b'neim uvneisehem, and people consume the flesh of their own children. Shenemar, it says in the pasuk, Shimu hadavar hazeh paros haboshon. Listen to this matter, the paros of Boshon. Gemara will explain this, who is a reference to. Asher Bahar Shomron ha'oishkois dalim. On the mountain of Shomron, they are terrible to the poor, the destitute, and they take advantage of them. Haroitzitzois evyoinim, and they crush the destitute. Omar Rava Kigon Hani Nishei de Mechoizo. The Paros Haboshan are a reference to those women, the wives of those who live in Mechoizo. The Ochlan V'loi Ovdon, they eat and they don't work. In other words, they steal from their husbands and they also live a luxurious lifestyle, causing their husbands to also steal. V'ksiv, it says in the Pasuk, Hikesi eschem b'shidofon v'yirokoin. I will smite you with winds that will dry out your crop. Harbois ganoiseichem v'karmeihem. There'll be a multitude of your gardens and your vineyards. V'teinechem v'zeiseichem, and your trees of figs and olives. Yoichala gazem, the locust will consume. V'ksiv, it says yeser hagezem. The pasuk afterwards, yeser hagezem ochel ha'arbe. In addition to them will come the arbe, the different type of locust. V'yeser arbe oichel hayelek, still another type of locust. V'yeser hayelek ochel hachasil, and still another form of locust, diminishing and getting and destroying all of the crop that's left over. V'ksivin, it says in the pasuk, vayigzar al yamin v'ra'ev, and he grabbed from the right, and he was still hungry. Vayoichal al small v'lo saveu, and he ate from those on the left, and he wasn't satiated. Ish besar zeroyo yoichelu, he was so desperate that he began consuming his own arm, the flesh of his own arm. Now the Gemara makes a drasha, al tikrei besar zeroyo, don't read that he consumed the flesh of his own arm, elo besar zaroi, rather the basar, the flesh of his children. The Gemara now turns to din, ba'avoin inui hadin, for the sin of procrastinating judgment. That means that they have a judgment, but nonetheless they procrastinate, not l'shem shomayim. The ivus hadin, or they pervert the judgment willfully. V'kilkul hadin, or they're not careful in thinking about the judgment the way it should be thought about in terms of all of its detail, and memela, automatically there's a kilkul in the din. Ubitul Torah, and a neglect for learning the Torah. What results? Says the Gemara, cherev ubizo rabo v'dever ubitzuras bo. And not only that, adds the Gemara, b'nei adam oichlin ve'enan svein, they eat and they're not satiated. V'oichlin lachmam b'mishkal, they eat bread at a certain measurement. Dirshu, it says in the pasuk, v'hevesi aleichem cherev, I'll bring upon you the sword, referring to, of course, war, nokemes nikam bris, the revenge of not keeping my covenant. The pasuk goes on to say, v'ne'esaftem el areichem, and I will gather you from your cities, v'shilachti dever, and I will send dever, pestilence, besoichachem, in your midst, v'nitatem biyad oyev, and I'll give you over to your enemy. And therefore that's what it was referring to before when it says cherev ubizo rava v'dever ubetzuras bo. The Gemara makes a drasha, that which says you're not keeping my covenant. The covenant here is actually a reference to the Torah itself. Ve'en bris ela Torah shenemar im lo brisi yoimam v'layla. If you do not keep my covenant, if it wasn't for my covenant rather, for day and night. Here the Gemara makes a drasha. The bris over here is referring to the Torah because it says in the pasuk in Yoshua v'higisa bo yoimam v'layla. So the bris of yom v'layla is referring to learning the Torah. V'ksiven, it says in the pasuk, I'll read in its entirety. B'shivrei lochem mate lechem. I'll break the staff of your bread. V'ofu eser nashim lachmechem, and 10 women will bake your bread. B'tanor ech, with one in one oven. V'heshivu lachmechem b'mishkal v'achaltem v'lo tizbo, and you will not be satisfied when eating that bread. And therefore it quotes over here, B'shivrei lochem mate lechem v'ofu eser nashim. So that's a reference to what we mentioned before. You'll be eating and will not be satisfied. And you'll be eating lachmechem b'mishkal. Says the Gemara, V'ksiv, concluding this, Yan u'biyan b'mishpetei ma'asu. And all of this is a result of being disgusted in my mishpat, in my din. And therefore, again, the inu hadin and the ivus hadin and the kilkul hadin is a result of these punishments. Says the Gemara, Ba'avon shevuos shav. In the sin of a shvua shav refers to when a person makes a shvua on something that certainly cannot be. That the rock is a piece of wood, or vice versa. A man is a woman. The shvua sheker, here it's not as clearly denoted as a lie, but it's a deceit, and a person makes a shvua on that. The chilul Hashem, when a person causes other people to sin, he sins himself, he causes others to sin. The chilul Shabbos, and he desecrates the Shabbos. The result of all of this, chayara rabba, there's an increase of terrible, vicious animals, ubehema kale, and other beasts of behema, they themselves become destroyed. Ubnei adam mismatin, and people become lessened. V'hadrachim mishtoimemin, and the ways of roads will become mishtoimemin, will become emptied. Shenemar says, V'im be'ela lil tivasu li, and if in these you will not then listen to me through the Yisurin. And the Gemara makes a drasha, Al tikre be'ela ela ba'ala, a reference to the Shvuos. So the Shvuos Shav and the Shvuos Sheker brings about all of this. V'ksiv, it says afterwards in the pasuk, V'shishlachti bochem es chayas haselde, reference to the chaya ro rabba. The pasuk goes on to say in the Toichacha, V'shikla eschem v'hichrisi es behemtechem, I'll cut out your beasts, your behemoths. V'himita eschem, and I will diminish you. V'nosham mudarcheichem, and I'll call you to be shmama. And that's therefore the punishment we mentioned before of behema kala b'nei adam mismatin and drachim mishtoimemin. V'ksiv, it said b'shua sheker, in regards to shua sheker, v'l'shavu b'shmi la sheker, you shall not make a shua in my name for falsehood. And it adds v'chilalta Hashem elokecha, and you'll make a chil Hashem. And then v'chil Hashem, it's written ksiv v'lo yischalu Hashem kochi. So we also see that what it's saying by the shua sheker also applies to chil Hashem. U'b'chil Shabbos as well, ksiv mechalel mos yumas, where it mentions also chilul. V'yolev chilul mishvua sheker, and therefore the limud where we get the result of all of the Shvua Sheker is these punishments, will also then be the punishment for Chilul Hashem and Chilul Shabbos. Ba'avon Shvichus Damim, the Gemara goes on to say, by Shvichus Damim, the sin of killing, murdering, Beis HaMikdash Chorav, the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed, V'Shchina Mistalekes Misrael, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shchina has to then leave Klal Yisrael. Shneimar, it says, V'lo tachnifu, I'll read you that entire pasuk. V'lo tachnifu, the pasuk goes on to say, Es ha'aretz asher atem bo, ki hadam hu yachnif es ha'aretz. As a result of the blood, v'la'aretz lo yichupa ladam, the land will not become absolved, it will not be atoned for by the dam that was spilled because of the murder. Says the Gemara, the rest, the pasuk goes on to say that you shall not metame the land that you are dwelling in, and that's a result of the shvichus damim causing the Shechina to also depart. Behold, if you will then metame the land, then they will not dwell there. And I myself cannot dwell there either. So there's a result of the Beis HaMikdash being destroyed and Klal Yisrael being suffering from the Siluk HaShechina. HaKadosh Baruch Hu cannot dwell in Eretz Yisrael when there's Shvichus Damim. Be'avon Gilui Arayos, for the sin of Gilui Arayos, Ve'avodas Kochavim, Ve'hashmodas Shmitin Ve'yovlois. And when Shemitah, every 7th year, the sabbatical year, and the Yovlois, the 50th year, the Jubilee year, are not being observed in Eretz Yisrael, the result of all of this is Galus Bala Olam. The world suffers Galus, both Jew and non-Jew, in Eretz Yisrael, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu cannot soivil when the land itself is not treated properly. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the Balabayis, and therefore he says, my land also needs to rest. And if the boteach in me, when that's not being observed even by Gentiles who live in the land, then also it results in galus. Umegalin oison, Kadosh Baruch Hu brings Klal Yisrael into galus, into exile. Uboin acherim v'yoshvim v'mekoymon, and as a result, others actually live in their place. Shneimar says, ki es kol ha'to'evos ha'el asu anshe haaretz. All of the to'evis that they did, referring to not only the Shemitah and the Yovlos not being observed, but this is referring to the Gili Arayos, the To'eva of Gili Arayos, the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael cannot be soivel, cannot endure the type of behavior of Gili Arayos, and therefore it says in the pasuk again, Ki es kol ha'to'evos ha'el osu anshe ha'oretz. The land, people of the land were doing this type of behavior. V'ksiv, it says, Vatitma ha'oretz. They defiled the land. Ve'efkod avono aleh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I will then mete out punishment for this sin. V'ksiv, it says, Lo soki ha'oretz eschem b'tamachem oiso. That's in regards again to Gili Arayos, that the land will spit out those who are metame the land through Gili Arayos. The Gemara now turns to Avodas Kochavim. Ksiv, it says, V'nosati es pigreichem, and I will give you the dead carcasses upon the carcasses, referring to the Avodah Zorah. V'ksiva hashimoisi es mikdashechem, and I will make shmama your holy places, referring to your sanctuaries. Ve'eschem azara begoyim, and I will scatter you amongst the Gentiles, amongst the nations. And therefore, again, a result of the Avodah Zorah, the Shmitin of Yovlois. Now the Gemara turns back to the Shmita and Yovlois, because until now we spoke about how Gili Arayos and Avodas Kochavim causes all of the punishment of Galus, and the fact that people will then live in the land instead of Klal Yisrael. It says V'ksiv in the pasuk by Yovlos and Shmitin, as tirtze ha'oretz es shabsosel, then the land will be appeased for not then observing its Shmitos and Yovel. Kol yemei hashama, all of the desolation, v'atem ba'oretz oivechem, and you will be then in the land of the enemy, your enemy. Ksiv kol yemei hashama tishbois, all of the days of the desolation, then the land will then have its opportunity to rest. The pasuk over there goes on to say, Kol yemei hashama tishbois es asher lo shavsa, for that which you didn't observe the Shemitah, the Shabbos, b'shabois seichem, b'shivtechem aleh, when you dwelled in it, now you have to leave the land, and in place will be then others who will then be there instead. Ba'avoin nevelois peh, nivlois peh, for the sin of nivlois peh, of disgusting type of speech. Tsaros rabois v'gezeros koshos mischadshois. The result is terrible gezeros that are also difficult and are renewed. Ubachure sonei Yisrael mesim. It's a euphemism for the sonei Yisrael, the euphemism for those, the Bachur Yisrael. Yisoimim va'almonos soyakim ve'enenonin. They're going to then, the Yisoimim and the almonos, the widows and the orphans will cry out, but they won't be answered as a result of nivel peh. Shneimar, as it says, now the Gemara brings a pasuk, al kain, therefore al bechurav lo yismach Hashem. On the bechurav who are then using their mouth in an improper way, because Adam is defined as a medaber, and therefore the power of speech is very significant when it's misused for nivel peh. There's terrible punishment that results, and therefore it says al kain lo bechurav lo yismach Hashem. It's not happy with them. Ve'es yisoima ve'es almonoisav liyirachim. You want to have rachmanis when they call out to him. Ki kulei chonef umeireya, because all of them are hypocrites and evildoers. V'kol peh doiver nevola, and those are their doiver nevola, their nivlos peh. By speaking nivel peh, because zois lo shav apa, for all of this, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't return his anger. Ve'oid, and further, yadoi netuya, his arm is extended. Ask the Gemara, what is the expression ve'oid yadoi netuya? And further, his hand is extended. The Gemara makes a drasha. Amar Rav Chanan bar Rabbe, bar Rava, hakol yoidim kala lama nichnasa lechuppah. Everybody knows why a kala will enter the chuppah. Ela kol amenabel piv afilu. But anybody who then speaks about with disgusting type of speech, afilu chois min alav gzar din shel shivim shana. Even when a person has a judgment that he will live a full life of 70 years, letoiva, for good, hoifchin alav l'ra. And therefore the Gemara is making a drasha. The words va'od yadoi netuya, and further his hand is extended. Va'od is a play on the words ve'ad, and forever. So that means that even a full lifetime will then foreverly be changed to a decree of bad. Amar Rabbe b'chashila barshila Amar Rav Chista. A person is menabel piv with his disgusting type of speech, they will deepen for him Gehinnom. Shenemar says in the pasuk, Shucha amuka pi zarois. The pit will be deepened for those who speak zarois. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok Amar af shoymeya v'shosik. Even a person who's a passerby, standing by, rather, and he's listening and he's silent, he doesn't then take action and say something, he will also suffer. Shenamah says in the rest of that verse, Ze'um Hashem yipol sham. The ones who's disgusted by Hashem, they listen passively and they do not say anything to the one who is menabel piv, yipol sham, he will also then fall there. Omar Voshaya kol hamemarek atzmo la'avero. If a person, he takes away all of his things that he's busy with to then focus on Avera, Chaburois upetzoin yoitzin boy, then various bruises and cuts will then form on his skin, certain lesions. Shenemar says, Chaburois potza tamruk bara. They are going to be on his skin, different petza, different types of cuts and bruises, as a result of somebody who then puts aside his time to then focus on Ra, to do Averos. Not only that, but he suffers the illness, which is a stomach ailment called hadroikin. And he will be then blowed with the inner chambers of his stomach. He'll receive blows. Omar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok, Simin la'avera hydroikin. A sign of avera is somebody who has the swelling of his stomach, this disease, this illness called hadroikin. Tanu Rabban along these lines explaining this inyan of hadroikin, Gimel mine hadroikin hein. There are 3 different types of hydroikin. Shel Aveiro, it's Avei. If hadroken that comes as a result of doing Aveiro, it causes his skin to be thickened. Vishel Ra'ov, if it's hadroken as a result of him starving, of not eating, then Tipoyach, then he has a swelling of his skin. Vishel Kishofim, as a result of Kishofim, then Dak, his skin becomes very thin. Shmuel Hakoton Chash Bey. Says the Gemara that Shmuel HaKatan, he suffered from this illness, Adroikin. Omar said, Ribono shel olam, mi may peace. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who's going to then cast a lot to know that I wasn't receiving this illness because of sin? Itzi, as a result of that tefillah, he was healed. Abai Chashbei, Abai also suffered from this illness of Hadroikin. Omar, he said, Rava Yadana Bey. Rava said rather, Yadana Bey ben Nachmeni. I know that Nachmeni, a reference to Abaye, the Machbi Nafshe. It's because he deprives himself of food, and therefore that's why he has this illness of Hadroikin, not because Chalila of an Aveiro. Rava Chashbei, Rava also became ill with Hidrokin. Asked the Gemara, V'ha Rava who? Wasn't it Rava the Omar, Nefishe Ketile Kedar, Menefiche Kofen? Wasn't Rava himself who said people die more because of the pots? The Kedar is referring to the pots where a person needs to relieve himself. Then they die more from that, but not relieving himself, than those who are Nefiche Kofan, who they get, their stomach becomes bloated. Says the Gemara, out of hunger, Menifei Chofan, they get bloated because of hunger. Don't they die more because of the Ketile Kedar? Which means that Rav would be careful not to then hold himself back from relieving himself. Says the Gemara, shiny Rava is different. Why? The ansile Rabbanon beidnei Baal Korche. The Rabbanon, when he would give his Torah lessons, so then the Rabbanon, the students, kept him back, meaning to say he wasn't able to then relieve himself and go to the bathroom. And that's why he resulted in this illness called Hidroikin.